It's Sunday, September 28th, and we have just witnessed a really big shift with Tropical Cyclone 9, soon to be Hurricane Imelda, potentially even away from the United States. That would be really good news. And we have seen a kind of a figurative shift for Hurricane Umberto. It has suddenly gone and intensified into a major Category 5 hurricane, kind of out of nowhere. And the track for Umberto is still pretty much unchanged. It's still going to go up by Bermuda and then take that turn out to the Atlantic, potentially playing a very big role in steering Hurricane Imelda, potentially even away from the United States. That would be the best outcome for us currently. But the biggest update is that it is now a Category 5 monster, 160 mile an hour sustained winds. This storm definitely means business. And then here is the infrared satellite of it. This is just a textbook Category 5 storm. You see that very symmetrical eye, and then just a very, very organized storm structure that we do see with these Category 5 monsters of a hurricane, which definitely is what Hurricane Umberto is. But what the actual big story today has been, it has definitely been the giant track shift that we've seen with Hurricane Imelda. For the past couple of days, it looked really confident that we might see a United States landfall, really anywhere from North Florida all the way up to the North Carolina Outer Banks. But now our cone of uncertainty does not even include a landfall in any of these locations. It is very rare that we see an eye of a storm trail out of this cone. So definitely that is looking very unlikely at the moment. It is still possible that we could see a landfall, as Hurricane Imelda is still just a tropical depression. It is not even turned into a tropical storm yet. So, and we're definitely still a couple days out now. We're roughly 3 days away from seeing a potential landfall even being made. So this track will definitely change within that time, but that is looking less and less likely, which is definitely good news for us. And this is that tropical depression, which is soon to turn into tropical storm, then later Hurricane Imelda. We can see that really hasn't had a super good chance to form, as it's really been interacting a lot with Cuba, and that land interaction has really hindered it. Everything else actually hasn't been super bad. The wind shear wasn't super favorable, but in very recent time, it is now favorable for development. And then, of course, the sea surface temperatures are definitely incredible for development. But currently, once this storm just kind of moves away from Cuba and stops interacting with land so much, I think that's when we're going to start to see it really form and start to organize. And then our model data today has really been showing a lot of the same thing, where it's kind of expecting Imelda to stall right off the coast of the Carolinas. This would bring a pretty concerning scenario for a lot of flooding rainfall being dumped on the region. This would definitely not be ideal in any way, but it would appear that most of the main impacts from winds and storm surge could potentially be mitigated with this solution. Of course, this would be if that big trough comes down and kind of punches it back out to sea. Of course, there'd also be a stationary front kind of along the coast acting as a shield or barrier. This would bring a lot of disorganizing shear, and then also dry air for this storm, kind of acting as just a wall that this storm would really have to punch through, which it currently is not expected through based off today's model data. Then also major hurricane Umberto could also play a very big role in kind of sucking it back out to sea. And then across our different models, we have kind of seen the same thing. Here is the GFS. It actually shows an even earlier turn away, which would dodge a lot of that big flooding rainfall threat. That would be very ideal. And then even for other models, like even the Icon, we're kind of seeing that same thing where it's just expecting to kind of get sucked away. So to see this model agreeance this many days out, we're only 3 days out, we definitely are starting to see the models hone in on something. Even our hurricane models, which I think are the most reliable models intensity wise and even track wise, are kind of showing the same thing occurring. So will we see a landfall on the United States coast? That is definitely looking more on the very unlikely side, as of right now, and it looks like we could dodge most of the impacts. So let's hope this trend continues, but still, if you're in this highlighted area from northern Florida all the way up to the Outer Banks, you are going to want to stay extremely weather aware of soon to be Hurricane Imelda. And then here's more of a deep dive on what will allow this storm to really organize and potentially become a big problem for us. The first thing is going to be the extremely warm sea surface temperatures. Imelda is going to have access to some of the warmest sea surface temperatures that we've seen a system track through all year. On top of this, we're also going to see some somewhat favorable shear. Yesterday, there was unfavorable shear for development, but centered on top of where Imelda will soon to form, we're actually seeing a corridor develop of some more favorable shear for development, which I definitely think is when we're going to start to see this storm organize and blossom. Of course, up by the US, there will kind of be that wall with that stationary front of some disorganizing shear and some dry air, which could kind of help to disorganize Imelda or just hinder the amount that it can organize. So we'll definitely have to see how that interacts with it when we get to there. But as for now, in the earlier stages, it looks like we could see a corridor of some somewhat favorable shear develop, except when it gets closer to the United States. And the final thing is going to be our moisture with this storm. As of right now, moisture is not an issue. Both of our storms, Umberto and then even soon to be Imelda, are in very moist environments. That is why Umberto has been able to, or that's one of the reasons why Umberto has been able to transform into this category 5 monster. And then that's also another reason why we think Imelda definitely has the chance to turn into potentially even a hurricane. But we're going to see a lot of dry air on the US coast, kind of showing where that stationary front is. And if Imelda cannot get closed off, that dry air could potentially interact with the center of the storm, greatly weakening it and hindering its rate of development. So that is another thing we're going to want to look for. And let's hope that is a solution that does happen, where it doesn't really have that chance to develop as much because dry air kind of gets entrained in its center. But other than the madness occurring, frankly, out in the tropics right now, we are seeing another very calm period of just general thunderstorms in the United States. That is all what's expected from the SPC today. However, I do think the highest probability of seeing some stronger thunderstorms is once again going to be out here in the desert Southwest. We could eventually see some storms bringing some strong gusty winds, maybe some very small hail, and that's pretty much going to be it for those storms today. And I think that's once again going to be where that highest probability of seeing some strong weather today is going to be. Otherwise, for the country, it seems that it's going to be pretty calm and pretty quiet. So overall, definitely looking good on the severe weather front, at least for now.